That's good. There we go. Up yours. I don't know. Well, that's good. Yeah. Say we're to design the next Mortal Kombat game. How would you make the combat? Okay, serious answer, I'd use MKX as a template, but make it around 70 to 80% of MKX's speed, keep the tight punish window on some things, but lengthen the window for most other things. If this all sounds like astrophysics to you, basically when someone messes up, you have a certain window to do damage to them, i.e. punish them, and that window varies from game to game. In MKX specifically, it was a very tiny window on a lot of things, to the point where even pros would miss punish windows like stormtroopers miss kill shots. So you can make a decent argument to tone that down for most things, not all, because you want to keep some unpredictability in the game, you want to keep people on their toes, but a sizable chunk of them, yes, and arguably MK9 got this balance a little bit better. There's a more elaborate explanation with examples and everything in this video, and make the general difficulty of performing combos akin to MK9, and also try to recreate MK9's sense of fun, balance, and freedom. That game had a particular flow to it whereby you could take small risks all the time, so long as you avoid specific situations that end you up in like a Cyrax net or stuff like that. MKX is kinda the same, but the combo potency is higher across the board, and it's far too easy to drive someone into the corner and end the round in 2 seconds. Click through your average MKX match on YouTube, any match of your choice, and most times you'll see the fighters in the corner. It's one of MKX's biggest faults. I get that they wanted to make corner play a big thing in it, but it was way too much. Being in the corner all the time gets old, and isn't nearly as exciting as not neutral play. It can be that one character has the advantage or is comboing or pressuring the other one, just not in the corner, because that's when things tend to end up in a more static situation. Whereas everywhere else, the fight is generally more dynamic visually. Stuff's flying around, fireballs are being thrown, teleports, jumping, dashing, flying chickens. I'd also experiment with bringing back sidestepping and making it a true 2.5D fighter, as I've talked about many times, which would also allow you to bring back death traps, because the arena has to be full 3D to accommodate sidestepping. But I'd keep the overall effectiveness of the third dimension limited so that it wouldn't be that alien compared to the recent games, while still offering some novelty and a couple extra possibilities. I have to emphasize this point because I see a lot of detractors about the sidestepping thing. First of all, there'd be a cooldown attached to it, so you can't just use it willy-nilly. It's meant to be a sparsely used strategic tool that nonetheless has some utility to it and adds some variety and options to matches. But even more broadly speaking, the goal is to keep it mostly a 2D fighter, because honest to gods, every fighting game, even 3D fighters, are more or less 2D fighters in the way they're perceived. Yes, you can have 3D movement, 3D arenas and all that, but you through the screen still perceive it as more or less 2 dimensions, and most of the things happen in those 2 dimensions, so arguably faffing about with a full-on 3D fighting game isn't worth the effort and might just overcomplicate things, and especially now that we have all this pedigree with NRS era being just full-on 2D fighters, going back to 3D might be a little bit too jarring for most people. So the goal is to still keep it mostly a 2D fighter, but add some extra optionality on top of it by minimal employment of the third dimension in very specific areas, in very specific ways. Sidestepping would be a case-specific, occasional extra way to avoid a fireball or overhead low mix-up sometimes, and it still carries a risk to it if you mistime it or guess wrong. More importantly, again, since it would require full 3D arenas, even if most of the stuff is happening in 2D, you can bring back death traps because of it. Because having death traps in a 2D environment is just not a thing, right? You inevitably get stuck in the corner way too quickly, and if both corners are a death trap, that's way too frustrating and stupid to play, even in casual matches. But this way, since movement in the third dimension would be extremely limited, you would just maybe once in a blue moon, get positioned in front of a death trap such that you could borderline even keep them on in a tournament setting. Instead of killing the competitive game, it becomes part of the game on account of how rare it happens. Another thing I think is important to add is more dependable, more varied forms of counterplay other than just the overused armor mechanic, which I'd still keep in, it has its place, and have ways to extend the fighting in exciting ways without artificially bloating match length. To that end, I'd introduce let's call it a kind of flawless block mechanic, but a more powerful, more elegant version of it, through which you can identify gaps in the strings your opponent is pressuring you with, on block to be clear, and exploit those gaps to counter their pressure and start your own, forcing them to now block your pressure or get hit. But then they can also make a read on the strings you use and do the same to you, so you have a bunch of elaborate block strings being exchanged. This is something I wanted to try for a while, because it more closely resembles how kung fu fights play out in Hollywood movies. There's a lot of blocking and a lot of back and forths, and a lot of tension on who gets to break through whose defenses. I really want to try something like this because it's become clear to me over the years that over-relying on armor, as the recent MK games have done, creates a very binary system, whereby, yes, in theory, you can guess whether it's going to be an overhead low mix-up or this thing or that thing and just react accordingly, but in practice, 80% of the time, you just armor through. You just wait to generate a bar and then muscle your way through, take some damage, and reset things. And then you start your own pressure and they do the same thing. It's very binary when you don't have any other alternatives. Again, I think armor should be in the game, it just shouldn't be the only thing in the game. Now, it's important to not veer too much to the other extreme, whereby things are so easy to block and mitigate and counter that literally fuck all happens and 95% of the match is just status quo. That's very boring to watch, so that's not what I'm talking about. The way Last Bronx, best fighting game in the world, solved this problem is, first of all, it removed chip damage from the game because it armed everyone with weapons, and so it makes sense that you take no chip damage if you block with weapons instead of your own arms and legs. Secondly, everything was cancelable. Every single string, normal, every basic attack was block cancelable. So you could start a jab or start a kick and then push block to cancel it mid-swing. Which sounds overkill, but it makes sense in the full context because third of all, to compensate for all this encouraged block fuckery, characters had very low health pools, which makes sense both gameplay-wise and within the in-game world because these are normal people. There's only so many wooden katana hits they could take to the face. And gameplay-wise, it meant that yes, you would block a lot of hits and avoid a lot of damage, but once you get opened, like half your health bar is gone. What this meant is that at the highest level, which no one really played, and so I'm probably not going to find good footage of, matches played out much more closely to the kung fu movies that I just mentioned, which is a lot of jabs, a lot of blows exchanged, not a lot of damage taken until someone messes up and gets a roundhouse to the face. And then everyone gasps and goes, oh. But then they get up and with 1/3 health remaining, they continue the fight and get the other guy to danger health, and it's really exciting, and everyone's watching with bated breath. The game trained you to always be on your guard, to always look for cancels, always look for quick opportunities and jabs to throw in there. Now, I don't think Mortal Kombat should be like Last Bronx. I think Mortal Kombat has a different flow. I think chip damage should, for the most part, still be in the game. I think given that you have all these special powers and magic and guns and everything, it's just a constant demolition zone where you just like chip away at the opponent's health constantly and they do the same to you. I think that's fine. I just want to A, provide more optionality to the general way that you can play the game, and B, make the fights more exciting to watch and more cinematic by encouraging multiple flurries of blows being exchanged in quick succession, without that necessarily having to mean that one player is getting pummeled with an overlong combo and losing 60% of their health. Most importantly, I'd lose as many nights of sleep as necessary in order to find a way to remove the poke system from the series. I wouldn't rest until I wiped that shit off the face of the earth. Rework the priority and utility of every type of attack, lows, mids, highs, and overheads. Now this wouldn't happen overnight. It would probably take several games to get there, but in my mind, it's a worthy long-term goal because pokes just suck. And it would take that much longer to change it because the whole community is more accustomed to poke than they are to their right hand. But having these small little testicle jabs that invariably look horrible because it's impossible to animate this to look good, having that be the standard way to interrupt pressure and reset the fighting is stupid, it looks bad, it looks nothing like a real fight, it encourages scrubby play, especially online, it overshadows other potentially better tools to do the same thing, so it's worth revolutionizing this stupid system. And when I say reprioritize all the types of attacks, this is partly why, because pokes encourage you to crouch more than you would in a normal fight. And the other thing that encourages this is messing up overheads and low attacks. The way this usually works is between the two types, low attacks are the most common, and then there's the occasional overhead attack that people have access to that mix things up, which is ass backwards when you think about it. Because again, it encourages players to crouch for 90% of the match, which is not what a real cool fight looks like. And then you only really uncrouch 10% of the time when you think an overhead is coming. It should be the opposite. Most mix-up options should be overheads. A select few should be low attacks that you occasionally have to read and block correctly, and that also leave the attacker much more open than overhead attacks. And the main way to interrupt pressure and reset the fighting should be straight jabs, not crouching pokes. This would take a lot of retraining. Again, everyone's used to using the fucking things, but as soon as you create a viable alternative to the system, everyone will copy it and give you no credit for it. And outside of the gameplay, there's plenty other things like killing the story mode and bringing back conquest mode, which I've talked about millions of times, but this should suffice for a comment reply. Good enough for a video. Post. Special thanks to Jiggly Puff Puff, Thomas Marshall, Serhi Hrishin, Clocks, Juan Bautista Cortez, Gennaro Chanella, as well as my other members for being irresponsible enough with their spending to support the channel.